Daniel had always been the kind of person who took pride in small things. He wasn't flashy or loud, just a simple man who believed in keeping his home neat and peaceful. Every morning he walked down the driveway with his cup of coffee, picked up his mail and waved to the neighbors. He loved his quiet street. The trees arched over the road like a tunnel of green, and the air always smelled like fresh grass after the sprinklers ran in the morning. For years it was calm, predictable, and friendly, just the way he liked it. That peace started to fade the week a new neighbor moved in next door. She arrived in a silver SUV that looked like it had already seen a few rough parking jobs. Her name was Karen. From the moment she pulled into the driveway, Daniel had a strange feeling. She parked half on her lawn and half on his, slammed the car door, and started yelling orders at the moving men before she even introduced herself to anyone. Still, Daniel believed in giving people a fair chance. He smiled, walked over, and offered a polite hello. She didn't look up, just said something about being too busy to chat right now. That was the first sign of the storm brewing ahead. The first few weeks, Daniel tried to be neighborly. He greeted her whenever he saw her, offered to help when she struggled to move a heavy box, and even brought her a small welcome gift, a homemade pie. She accepted it with an awkward nod and said, "Thanks, but I don't really eat sweets." It didn't bother him too much. He figured not everyone was friendly and that was fine. But soon after, he started noticing something odd. One morning, as Daniel walked down to grab his mail, he noticed his mailbox leaning to one side. The metal post was bent slightly, like something had hit it. He thought maybe the delivery truck backed into it, or perhaps some kids had messed around the night before. He straightened it, tightened the bolts, and went on with his day. A week later, it happened again, but this time the damage was worse. The mailbox door hung open. The post cracked at the base. He sighed, replaced the entire thing, and tried not to think too much about it. But when it happened a third time, he knew it wasn't random. It was deliberate, or at least the result of someone being very careless. That night, Daniel sat on his porch and thought about it. His street was quiet. No teenagers, no pranksters. The only car that parked close enough to his mailbox was the silver SUV next door. He tried to remember if he had ever seen it backing up close to his side. And then it hit him. He often heard the sound of tires crunching over the gravel right before his mailbox went missing. The next morning, Daniel waited by his window with his coffee in hand. Sure enough, as Karen backed out of her driveway, her rear tire scraped along the grass near his mailbox. He leaned forward, watching carefully, and saw her bumper lightly clip the side of his post. The mailbox wobbled, tilted, and she drove off without even looking back. His stomach turned. She had done it and she didn't even care. Still, Daniel wasn't the kind of man to rush into confrontation. He thought maybe she didn't realize what she'd done. That afternoon, he walked over to her driveway while she was unloading groceries. He tried to keep his tone calm. "Hey, I just wanted to mention, my mailbox keeps getting damaged. I think maybe it's a bit too close to where you back out. Could you maybe be a little careful next time?" Karen froze, turned, and gave him a look like he had just accused her of a crime. "Your mailbox is too close to my driveway," she said flatly. "It's not my fault if you put it in a bad spot." Daniel blinked, surprised. "It's actually right where it's supposed to be. The post office measured it when I first put it in." She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, maybe you should move it anyway. It's hard to back out with it there." Then she turned and walked inside, leaving him standing in her driveway holding his breath. He realized arguing wouldn't help. Some people didn't care about right or wrong, they just wanted to win. Weeks passed and Daniel hoped the problem would stop. But one morning he found his mailbox completely destroyed, smashed into the ground, post split clean in half. He felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was the fourth time. He couldn't keep replacing it forever. He decided to set up a small camera near his porch, hidden behind one of his flower pots. It wasn't much, but it would at least show what was happening. 2 mornings later, he got his answer. He watched the footage with his jaw tight. Karen's SUV backed out slowly, paused, then suddenly rolled right into his mailbox. The metal bent instantly. Instead of stopping, she pulled forward, reversed again, hit it a second time, and drove off. Daniel felt his chest tighten. It wasn't an accident. She was doing it on purpose, or at least didn't care if she did. He replayed the clip twice just to make sure, but there was no doubt. Her car's license plate, the angle, the smirk on her face, it was all there. He sat in silence for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the video playback. Then he leaned back, sighing. What kind of person did that? He could have gone straight to the police, but Daniel still wanted to believe this could be solved peacefully. He went next door again that afternoon, knocked gently and waited. She opened the door halfway, her expression already annoyed. "Can we talk for a second?" he asked. "About what?" she said sharply. "My mailbox," he replied calmly. "I have video of what's been happening. I just want to figure out how we can stop this before it gets worse." She crossed her arms. "You're spying on me now?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "No, that's creepy," she said, cutting him off. "You shouldn't be recording people. Maybe I should report you for that." He realized then that reasoning with her was useless. She wasn't going to admit anything or try to fix it, so he walked back home feeling defeated. That night, as he sat in his living room with the dim glow of the TV flickering across the walls, he thought about all the years he had worked to make his home a place of peace, and how one person could so easily disrupt it. The next morning, the mailbox was gone completely. Not just damaged, gone. The post was snapped in two, and the pieces were lying halfway down the ditch like someone had dragged them there. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just annoyed anymore. He was determined. He decided that if the police wouldn't help and she refused to take responsibility, he'd have to find another way. He drove to the hardware store that afternoon, bought a new post, and spent hours installing it again. As he tightened the final bolts, he looked over at Karen's driveway. Her car wasn't there. He wondered if she'd noticed the new mailbox and take another swing at it. A small part of him hoped she would, because next time he planned to be ready. That evening, he replayed the footage one last time and saved it on his phone. Not out of revenge, but just in case. He couldn't shake the feeling that she'd keep doing it until someone stopped her. The thought made him restless. As the sun set and the cicadas began their nightly song, Daniel sat on his porch again, the same place where he used to enjoy peaceful mornings. He looked at the new mailbox standing tall at the end of the driveway. He wondered how long it would last this time. He didn't know it yet, but this would be just the beginning of a long and frustrating battle between two neighbors. One who believed in patience, and another who thought rules didn't apply to her. For now, though, Daniel just wanted to sleep. But as he turned off the porch light and walked inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet street would never be the same again. The next morning was quiet. The street looked calm, the same as always, but Daniel didn't feel the same way. He walked to the end of his driveway with his coffee and looked at the new mailbox he had installed the day before. It stood there clean and strong, almost shining under the morning sun. He took a deep breath and told himself this one would last. Maybe, just maybe, she'd stop. For the first few days, everything seemed fine. He saw Karen a few times watering her plants or dragging her garbage cans to the curb, but neither of them spoke. She didn't even glance in his direction, and that was fine by him. Daniel wasn't looking for a fight. He just wanted peace. One afternoon, as he was mowing his lawn, he saw her backing her SUV out of her driveway. The tires rolled dangerously close to the edge again. He stopped, turned off the mower, and watched carefully. She reversed straight out, turned sharply, and her back tire hit the patch of grass right near his mailbox. It missed by just an inch. Daniel felt his heart skip, but the SUV drove off without a hit. He let out a long breath. Maybe she had learned. For a week, nothing happened. Daniel began to relax again. He even told his sister over the phone that things were finally looking up. She laughed and said maybe the neighbor realized she couldn't win. Daniel chuckled and said he hoped so, but peace never lasted long on that street anymore. One morning he opened his front door and froze. The mailbox was on the ground again. The metal box was crushed inward, the pole bent almost flat. It looked like it had been hit hard, much harder than before. He closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. The anger he had been holding back for weeks finally started to rise. He walked up to it, crouched down, and ran his fingers along the bent metal. Tire marks were fresh in the dirt next to it, wide ones from the same type of SUV tires she had. There was no question now. She had done it again. Daniel stood up slowly, looked toward her house, and saw her car parked neatly in her driveway. The back bumper had a small new dent on the corner. The paint chipped slightly. That was all the proof he needed. He spent the rest of the morning pacing inside his living room. Part of him wanted to knock on her door and yell, but he knew it wouldn't solve anything. She'd deny it again. Maybe even try to twist the story like before. He had to be smart this time. That evening, he took the damaged mailbox out of the ground and left the broken pieces on his porch. Then he went online and searched for local community laws about property damage and mailbox placement. He read everything carefully, learning exactly what was allowed and what wasn't. By the time he finished, he realized he had done everything right from the beginning. He was fully within his rights. The next day, Daniel decided to go to the local police station. He brought his phone with the video clips from his security camera. When it was his turn at the desk, he explained the situation calmly. The officer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, watched the video closely. When it ended, the officer sighed. "That does look like she hit it," he said. "But it might be tricky. It's private property, and unless she admits to it or someone else witnesses it directly, it could be considered accidental." Daniel frowned. "Even after the fourth time? I understand how frustrating that must be," the officer said sympathetically. "If it keeps happening, keep your camera running. Document every incident. If we see a pattern, we can issue a report." Daniel thanked him, though he left feeling a little disappointed. He knew the officer was just doing his job, but it still felt unfair. He was the one following the rules, and yet he was the one replacing mailbox after mailbox while she faced no consequences. That evening, he installed a new mailbox again, his fifth one. This time, he made sure the camera had a clear view of the driveway and the entire street. He even added a small motion light above the porch to brighten the area at night. He wanted every moment captured if she tried anything again. A few days later, he caught her looking toward his house while she watered her flowers. Their eyes met for a second before she turned away. There was something in that look, a mix of irritation and guilt, maybe even curiosity about what he was planning. He didn't smile. He just watched silently and went back inside. Later that week, Daniel was returning home from work when he noticed something strange. The mailbox wasn't damaged this time, but the little flag on the side was missing, snapped clean off. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him clench his jaw. She was still playing games. He didn't confront her. Instead, he just repaired it again and made sure his camera was recording everything clearly. By now, his patience was wearing thin, but he also knew losing his temper would only make things worse. He had to stay calm, plan carefully, and let her reveal herself in her own time. Then one Saturday morning, he finally got the proof he needed. He woke up to the sound of a loud thud followed by a scraping noise. He jumped out of bed, rushed to the window, and saw her SUV pulling away from the curb. The mailbox was hanging by a thread tilted sideways. He quickly grabbed his phone, opened the live feed from the camera, and watched as it showed her backing up. Slow, deliberate, and straight into it. The metal bent under the pressure of her bumper. She paused, looked out her window, then drove away like nothing had happened. Daniel felt his pulse racing. He didn't even wait this time. He went outside, took pictures of the damage, and saved the footage. That afternoon, he returned to the police station with the new evidence. The same officer met him and reviewed the video. This time, the look on the officer's face changed. "All right," he said finally. "That's enough. We'll file a report for property damage. She can't keep doing this." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling a small wave of relief. But even then, he knew it wouldn't stop her completely. Some people only changed when they faced consequences they couldn't ignore. When he returned home, Karen was sitting on her porch, sunglasses on, sipping from a tall glass. He could feel her eyes following him as he walked by, carrying his toolbox to fix the mailbox again. He didn't say a word. He just went about his work, tightening the bolts, straightening the post, and making sure everything looked perfect again. The silence between them was thick, like an invisible wall neither wanted to break. As the sun set, Daniel sat on his porch swing, watching the sky turn orange. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a soft glow on the road. He thought about everything that had happened. He had always believed people could be reasoned with, that fairness mattered. But this situation had tested that belief more than anything else in his life. He had done everything right, been kind, patient, followed the law, and still, he was the one paying for it. It made him think about how some people simply took advantage of kindness because they mistook it for weakness. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what to do next. The thought kept circling in his mind. She wouldn't stop. Not until she got a real reason to. He turned to look out the window. The moonlight spilled across the yard, lighting up the broken edge of the mailbox that still needed a little fixing. That was when an idea started to form. He didn't want to hurt anyone, and he certainly didn't want to break any laws, but he wanted her to learn something, to finally see that actions have consequences. As he closed his eyes, a plan began to take shape. It wasn't revenge, it was a lesson, one she wouldn't forget. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the next mailbox he would build would change everything. Daniel spent the next morning sitting at his kitchen table with a notebook open and a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He kept thinking about everything that had happened. The bent mailboxes, the fresh tire marks, her smug looks, and the way she acted like she owned the entire street. It wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. It was about respect. He had done everything right. He had been patient, polite, and even forgiving. But she had pushed too far. He didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. But sometimes peace didn't come until someone learned a hard lesson. That's when an idea came to him. Simple, legal, and harmless, but powerful enough to make her think twice before backing into his property again. He drove to the hardware store that afternoon, the same one he'd been visiting far too often lately. The workers there already recognized him. When they saw him walk in, one of them chuckled. "Another mailbox?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, but this one's going to be different." He walked down the aisles, picking up materials one by one. He grabbed a steel post, thick and heavy, almost industrial. Then he bought a bag of concrete mix, a few bolts, and a brand new mailbox that looked plain from the outside, but was built from strong metal. On his way out, the cashier asked if he was rebuilding again. Daniel just said, "Not exactly," and left it at that. Back home, he spent hours digging a deep hole near the edge of his driveway. He worked slowly, measuring everything carefully. This time he poured concrete into the base, setting the steel post firmly into the ground. Once it dried, it wasn't going anywhere. Then he attached the new mailbox on top, making sure it looked completely normal, nothing that would draw attention. From the outside, it was just another regular mailbox, maybe even a little nicer than before. But Daniel knew it was built to last. As he stepped back to look at his work, he felt a small wave of satisfaction. He hadn't broken any rules. The mailbox was perfectly within city codes. It just happened to be strong, very strong. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and went inside, glancing briefly at Karen's driveway. Her silver SUV was parked there, its bumper still showing a faint dent from the last time. For once, she wasn't outside. The house looked quiet. He almost smiled to himself. Maybe she'd never even noticed the difference. That night, Daniel sat on his porch again. The air was still warm from the day, and the sound of crickets filled the yard. He looked at the new mailbox and felt calm. It stood there proudly, steady and straight, like a small sign of patience winning over pettiness. He hoped that was the end of it. But the universe has a way of testing people right when they think the storm has passed. 3 mornings later, he heard the familiar sound, the low rumble of an engine starting next door. He glanced out his window and saw Karen's SUV backing out slowly. His heartbeat quickened. She reversed carefully at first, then, just as always, turned her wheel too sharply. The corner of her bumper lined up perfectly with the edge of his mailbox. Daniel held his breath. Then came the sound, a loud metallic thud that echoed down the street. He saw her SUV jolt slightly before stopping. The car stayed still for a few seconds. Then the engine roared again and she pulled forward fast, almost in panic. He stepped outside, pretending to check his morning mail. When he reached the end of the driveway, he saw it. His mailbox stood untouched, strong and unbent. But her car hadn't fared so well. The rear bumper had a new deep crack right across it. Bits of silver paint were smeared on the steel post. Karen was standing by her SUV now, staring at the damage with disbelief. Her jaw was tight, her hands on her hips. When she noticed Daniel, her expression shifted from shock to anger. "What did you do to that mailbox?" she snapped. Daniel kept his voice calm. "I replaced it again. It's solid metal," she shouted. "That thing's dangerous." "It's perfectly within the city code," he replied evenly. "I checked twice." She pointed at her broken bumper like it was his fault. "You built that thing to damage my car." Daniel took a slow breath. "No," he said softly. "I built it so it wouldn't be damaged again." For a moment, she looked like she was about to explode. Then she stormed back to her car, slammed the door, and drove off, tires screeching as she sped down the street. A few of the neighbors had come out by then, curious about the noise. One older man from across the street called out, "Everything all right?" Daniel nodded. "Just a little misunderstanding," he said quietly. The man chuckled. "That mailbox looks strong. Bet it won't go anywhere this time." Daniel smiled faintly. "I sure hope not." For the rest of the day, he couldn't help but replay the scene in his mind. He hadn't meant to humiliate her, but there was a certain sense of justice in what had happened. She had been careless for weeks, destroying his property without a second thought. Now, for the first time, she was the one dealing with the damage. Later that afternoon, as Daniel was watering his lawn, he saw a police car pull into the street. It stopped right in front of his house. The same officer from before stepped out. "Afternoon, sir," the officer said. "Got a complaint from your neighbor. Something about your mailbox damaging her vehicle." Daniel almost laughed but held it in. "Of course," he said. "Would you like to take a look?" They walked to the end of the driveway. The officer examined the mailbox carefully, then took a few steps back and looked at its position. "This looks fine to me," he said. "You didn't move it from before?" "Nope, it's exactly where it's always been. Just stronger this time." The officer smiled a little. "Smart move. Nothing illegal about building a solid mailbox." Karen had come outside by then, standing near her driveway with her arms crossed. Her face was red, a mix of frustration and embarrassment. "So that's it?" she said loudly. "You're just going to let him build a weapon by the street?" The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but his mailbox meets all city regulations. If you accidentally backed into it, that's a civil matter, not a criminal one." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the officer added, "I've seen the previous reports about your car hitting his property. Maybe it's best to give his mailbox some extra space next time." Her expression froze. She didn't say another word. She just turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door behind her. When the officer left, Daniel stood there for a long while, the sun shining warmly on his face. For the first time in weeks, he felt a little lighter. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't fought. He'd simply stood his ground. Over the next few days, things were noticeably different. Karen still left for work every morning, but she backed out much more carefully now. She kept her car far from the edge of his driveway. Sometimes she even looked around before reversing, checking her mirrors twice. Daniel noticed, but he never said anything. He just smiled quietly to himself. Neighbors began talking about the incident in hushed tones. Word spread quickly about the indestructible mailbox that had beaten the SUV. Some of them even asked Daniel what kind of material he'd used. He just laughed and said, "A little patience and a lot of concrete." At night, when he sat on his porch, things finally felt peaceful again. The street was quiet, the air soft and still. The tension that had hung between their houses for so long was slowly fading, but Karen's pride had taken a hit. She stopped speaking to anyone on the street. When she did go outside, she moved quickly, her head down. Daniel didn't take pleasure in her discomfort. He just hoped she had finally learned what he'd been trying to show her all along. That respect goes both ways. One evening, as he was watering his plants, he heard her front door open. She stepped out holding a small trash bag, walked to her bin and glanced at him briefly. Their eyes met for the first time since the accident. Neither said a word. She threw the bag away, turned, and went back inside. Daniel turned off the hose and looked at his sturdy mailbox at the end of the driveway. It stood there quietly, like a reminder that sometimes the best way to deal with unfair people isn't through shouting or anger, but through patience, persistence, and a little bit of cleverness. That night, as he locked up his house and looked once more toward the street, he couldn't help but smile. The battle of the mailboxes was over. At least that's what he thought. Because even though the mailbox was safe, something told him Karen wasn't quite done yet. The day after the last mailbox incident, Alex woke up with a strange calm. He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt tired of fighting, tired of worrying, and tired of the endless back and forth with the woman next door. He looked out the window toward the front yard. The new mailbox stood untouched, shining in the soft morning light. He knew it wouldn't last. That same afternoon, Alex decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He passed a few of his neighbors who had seen the drama unfold over the past few weeks. Most gave him sympathetic smiles, a few shook their heads as if they couldn't believe it was still happening. One of them, Mrs. Caldwell, stopped him near her driveway. "You know she's been talking about you again?" she said quietly. Yesterday she told the mailman that you're spying on her with cameras. Alex sighed. I just want to be left alone, Mrs. Caldwell. I'm not doing anything wrong. I know, dear, she said gently. But that woman, she's trouble. Be careful. As he continued walking, Alex thought about what she said. He didn't want trouble, but it seemed like trouble always found him, or rather his mailbox. When he returned home, he noticed something odd. There was a white envelope sticking out of his front door. No stamp, no address, just his name written in messy handwriting. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper with 4 words, "Mind your own business." Alex froze for a second, looking around the street. Everything looked normal, but he could feel eyes watching him. His heart raced. He stepped inside quickly and locked the door. That evening, he called his friend Daniel, who lived a few blocks away. Daniel had helped him rebuild one of the earlier mailboxes and had been following the situation closely. I think she left me a note, Alex said. Who else would it be? Daniel replied. You need to document this. Take photos, keep the note. You might need it later. I already did, Alex said, but I'm starting to think this won't end until something serious happens. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then maybe it's time to give her a taste of her own medicine, but the smart way. Alex didn't say anything right away, but an idea began to form in his mind. He wasn't going to stoop to her level or do anything that could get him in trouble. But maybe he could make her realize she wasn't untouchable. Over the next few days, Alex went about his routine as usual, acting as if nothing had happened. He mowed the lawn, waved to neighbors, checked his mailbox carefully every morning. But secretly, he was working on something new, a harmless, clever plan. He bought a second mailbox identical to the one outside. But this one wasn't meant for the front yard. It was part of a setup. He placed a small camera inside, aimed directly at the curb where his mailbox stood. The lens was tiny, barely visible. He made sure it only recorded the mailbox area, nothing else, so there'd be no issue with privacy or laws. On the third night, he left the camera running. And just as he suspected, at around 11:45 p.m., a figure walked up the street. She wore a light-colored hoodie and gloves, moving quickly and looking around. The moment she reached the mailbox, she pulled out a hammer from her bag. Alex's heart raced as he watched the live feed from his phone. She swung once, then stopped. She glanced toward the house as if sensing something. Then she dropped the hammer and ran off. The next morning, the mailbox was dented but still standing. Alex smiled to himself. He finally had proof, and it was all recorded clearly. He went to Daniel's house that afternoon to show him the footage. Daniel whistled when he saw it. You've got her, man. This is solid. I'm not sure what to do next, Alex admitted. I don't want to cause a scene, but I can't let her keep getting away with it. Call the authorities, Daniel said simply. You don't even need to confront her. Just hand over the footage and let them deal with it. Alex nodded slowly. He knew Daniel was right. That evening, he called the local police department and explained everything. They asked him to bring the footage and a statement the next morning. When Alex went down to the station, the officer on duty listened carefully. He watched the video twice, then leaned back in his chair. This is clear evidence, the officer said. We can handle it from here. You've been more than patient. Alex thanked him and left, feeling a mix of relief and nervous anticipation. He didn't know how Karen would react once she found out. 2 days later, he got his answer. Around noon, he heard loud voices outside. He peeked through the curtains and saw a police car parked in front of Karen's house. 2 officers were talking to her while another stood near the curb taking notes. Karen was furious, waving her arms, yelling, pointing toward Alex's yard. The officers stayed calm, one of them holding up a hand as if trying to keep her steady. Then after a few minutes, they guided her toward the car. She resisted, but they were firm. Alex stepped outside quietly. A few neighbors had gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. One of the officers nodded at him. Thank you for your cooperation, he said. We'll handle it from here. Karen shouted something he couldn't make out as they closed the car door. The police drove off, leaving the street unusually quiet. That night, Alex sat on his porch for a long time, just listening to the crickets. He wasn't happy about what happened, not exactly. He didn't enjoy seeing anyone in trouble, even her. But he felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in months, the air around his home felt calm again. The next morning, his phone buzzed with messages from neighbors who had seen everything. Most were supportive. About time someone stood up to her, one said. You handled it the right way, another added. Alex smiled. Maybe he had finally put an end to the madness, or so he thought. That evening he noticed something odd again. A white car slowly passed by his house twice. The third time it stopped briefly near the curb before driving off. He couldn't see the driver clearly, but something in his gut told him this wasn't over yet. He checked the camera footage, but it was too dark to make out any details. The thought of another confrontation made his stomach tighten. He had done everything right. He followed the rules, stayed patient, and still the unease crept back in. Alex decided to install brighter lights near the front yard and add another camera for safety. He wasn't scared, but he was cautious. He didn't know if Karen would be back or if someone else had decided to stir trouble. That night, as the lights flickered softly over the driveway, Alex leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, if she comes again, she'll get the surprise she'll never forget. It wasn't a threat. It was a quiet promise, one of peace, patience, and a plan that was far from over.